What is truth? The ultimate guide. Warning, this is a very advanced episode, so be careful. It's my great honor and privilege to be able to be the first person today in your life to tell you what truth is. Nobody has ever told you in your entire life what truth is. This is a big deal. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to understand what I'm saying, but it's a big deal to understand what truth is. A common misconception that people have about truth is they think that scientists, academics, philosophers, or priests and rabbis understand what truth is, and they don't. They don't. Truth is something that transcends science, which is something that just doesn't compute in the minds of most ordinary people. So we're going to work through all that. But this is a very tricky topic. The amazing thing is, though, and the good news here, is that it actually is possible to know what the truth is and to understand it. So this is not just speculation and theory on my part. And in fact, my bold claim here is that I have become directly conscious of absolute truth, and that you can too. So it's not that I have some special privilege here. You can do it. Everybody can do it. The problem is that nobody does it, or hardly anyone does it. So I will be explaining why this is the case and helping you to understand where you're going wrong. But you need to appreciate how tricky of a topic this is and how serious this is. So even though I'll be explaining stuff to you here, that's not going to be nearly enough. You're going to have to do homework. You're going to have to really pursue the truth to understand the things that are said in this episode, because like I said, this is very advanced stuff. And none of this can be taken for granted. Also, I just want to underscore that nothing I say here should be taken as a belief, as an ideology. Don't take it as a religion. Don't take me on my word. You have to do the work of finding out what I'm going to be telling you here. So let's begin. So I guess I should tell you a little bit of the story of how I became conscious of absolute truth. What truth is. Now, I've become conscious of it in many different respects, in many different ways, at many different points in my life. So it didn't just happen once, but there was one particular moment which is still very vivid in my mind that I can recall, where I penetrated through to what truth really means, what that word really means. Because we use this word, colloquially all the time, casually in conversation. You've used it in school as though you knew what it meant. But isn't it funny how you went through 12 years of school and then maybe 4 more years of university, and not once did anyone tell you what the truth is, nor did you sit down and seriously question to yourself and try to figure out what the truth is. You took it for granted. I would bet you $1,000 that most of you never even in your entire life cracked open a dictionary and looked up what the word truth means. Of course, not the dictionary would know, because the dictionary doesn't know. The dictionary is going to have a circular definition, which just points you to other terms, all of which are defined in terms of another. And so it'll be a circular definition, which doesn't help you at all. But, most people haven't even bothered to go that deep in their inquiry into what truth is. So anyways, I was standing there one day taking a piss. And as I was pissing, I was wondering, what is the truth? Because this is a question that I've been asking myself since I was a teenager, basically for my whole life. I've been asking the question of what is the truth, pursuing this question for years and for decades, for thousands of hours, contemplating, racking my mind over it. So I'm standing there pissing, and I'm just wondering to myself, what is the truth? What is it? What is truth? What is truth? What is truth? And then it hit me, just like that. The conceptual notion of truth melted away. The idea that truth is some sort of idea in my mind. That whole notion melted away. And then what dawned was actual truth. That's what was revealed to me. And it's nothing crazy like you might think. It's just being. It's the entirety of the present moment. As I was standing there pissing, that very moment, all of it became the truth. And while that might not sound too profound to you, it was extremely profound, So the trickiness with truth is that at the same time, it's totally ordinary and there's nothing crazy about it. And yet, also, on the other hand, it's the most extraordinary, radical, outrageous, shocking, mind-blowing thing you've ever understood. And of course, it certainly helped me that I was on LSD at the time. So I highly recommend that if you're going to be pursuing the question of what is truth, you want to have some assistance, because the majority of people, even people who meditate, I've known many people who meditate, who do yoga and so forth, even people who consider themselves awake, and they still don't really understand what the word truth actually means. So let me explain it to you here. But first, let's tackle some of the common misconceptions about truth. Truth is a belief. This is false. Truth is a concept or an abstraction. This is false. Truth is a philosophy or some ideology, like a religion. This is false. Truth is knowledge. This is false. That truth is a theory or a model. This is false. That truth is science, logic, or mathematics. This is false. That truth is impossible to access. This is false. That truth is subjective. This is false. That truth must be logical and it must make sense. This is false. That truth can be written down in a book and that you can read this book and learn the truth. This is false. That truth can be proven, and that if truth exists, then surely it's provable. This turns out to be false. And the last misconception is that truth is no big deal, and that it's irrelevant to ordinary life. This is false. So now let's dig into what truth is. There are two kinds of truth that we need to distinguish here. Otherwise, we get very confused very fast. The first kind is relative truth, we'll call it. These are conceptual truths. These are truths of the mind. And the second kind is absolute truth, or truth with a capital T, as I sometimes say. This is truth that is true under all circumstances and conditions. It's the opposite of relative, you might say. It's not conceptual, it's actual. And so you have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes I will use the word just simply truth ambiguously without telling you explicitly which one of these I'm referring to. Sometimes I'll just say the truth. And usually when I say it with authority like that, the truth. That's what I mean by absolute truth. Truth with a capital T. And then sometimes I just say truth, in which case I'm just talking about some relative truth. So what's the difference between these two? Well, you have to be careful about how the words are used. I'll try to be clear in this episode, but in future episodes, sometimes I use the word rather loosely. And most people do. Most people don't distinguish between these two and can create confusion. So, what are some examples of relative truth? The sky is blue is a relative truth. The Eiffel Tower is located in Paris, France is a relative truth. A human being's hand has 5 fingers on it. That's a relative truth. 1 + 1 = 2. What do you think? Relative or absolute? Relative. That's a relative truth. Squirrels like to eat acorns. A relative truth. World War II happened. A relative truth. Objects are made out of atoms. Also a relative truth. Now, you might be scratching your head at this point like, Leo, a relative truth. How can the sky is blue be a relative truth? What's relative about that? And 1 + 1 = 2 relative? How is this relative? Conceptual? I mean, if 1 + 1 = 2 is not the truest thing we know, then what does truth even mean? That's right. That's a very, very good question. But I want you now to start to get interested in this idea of absolute truth. Because if all the stuff I mentioned above is relative, and that's some of the most certain stuff you've ever known in your life, then what could the absolute be? And what would it mean for all the above stuff, given that it's relative, for it to be contingent? Meaning that it could be otherwise. See? As amazing as this might sound to you, all of the stuff I mentioned up above, these are all pseudo-truths. Because they depend upon concept, symbols, language, interpretation, and thought. These are all truths that are held within your mind. And for the truth of these statements to register in your mind requires that your mind work in certain ways. See? So even just to take a statement like, the sky is blue, to be able to say that to yourself in your mind and then either validate it or invalidate it, to believe in it or not to believe in it, to claim it as true or false, already this requires interpretive functions in your mind. First of all, you have to understand the language. So this is a linguistic truth. You have to be able to decipher the words. You have to be intelligent enough as an organism to be able to even understand what language is. Many animals don't. If you tell a donkey that the sky is blue, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. He's not going to understand what that means. So he can't claim it as true or untrue. And in fact, a donkey doesn't even know the difference between truth and falsehood. That's the level that a donkey is at. See? We have to be very careful with our assumptions here. We can't just assume that all consciousnesses and all beings are humans, nor can we assume that humans are the highest level of consciousness and intelligence that there is in the universe, or that is accessible, if we go beyond ordinary human faculties. So the sky is blue. This is contingent and relative in many ways. First of all, which sky are we talking about? Are we talking about the sky of the Earth, or are we talking about the sky of another planet? You see? So depends, of course, which planet you're standing on. But even if you are more specific and you say, well, the sky of the Earth is blue, still depends. What time of the day are you looking at the sky? At nighttime, it's not blue. But even if you say, okay, well, Leo, what I mean is the sky during high noon with no clouds, it's blue. Well, what do you mean by blue? There's many different shades of blue. Which blue are you talking about? See, the mind has to take all of these factors into account just to make sense of this statement, the sky is blue. It seems so simplistic, but really the sky is blue is a gross abstraction. People think, well, no, the sky is blue is just a fact. It's not a fact. There's nothing factual about that. This is a gross, highly complicated abstraction which depends on how you're interpreting every word in that statement. And even if all of that is given to you, in the end, we could say, well, the sky appears blue to human eyes. Does it appear blue to a dog, to a cat, to a lizard, to a worm, to an alien? Is it still blue? Does a worm even see a sky? Does a sky even exist for a worm? Does the color blue even exist for a worm? There are some animals for whom colors may not even be a thing. So in that case, what is the sky actually? Because, if a worm looks at the sky and let's see, he sees it as orange, and then I look at it and see it as blue, and then some alien looks at it and sees something else, who's right? What is the sky actually? See, it's not so easy. It's not so easy at all. These simple questions. A human hand has 5 fingers. I posted a video recently on my blog of humans who have 6 fingers. They exist. It's actually a genetic trait that gets passed on. It's a very rare gene. Humans with 6 fingers, 6 functional fingers. Pretty freaky. That's a thing. And then even with 1 + 1 = 2, you might say, well, Leo, how can this possibly be relative and contingent? Supposedly mathematics is the universal language. Even aliens on another star system, if we send them binary code, they're supposed to be able to interpret our binary code or whatever we send them, and through mathematics we can communicate this sort of idea. No, that's not how it works. You see, you need to understand what these symbols mean. One, the symbol 1, the symbol plus, the symbol equal sign, the symbol 2. And then you have to understand what is trying to be said by that statement. These are not obvious at all. There was a time in your life where you didn't know what 1 or plus or equals or 2 was, let alone how all that stuff fit together. You have to learn that. That required trial and error. It required insight. It required some function of thought and the mind. Don't overlook that stuff. Another aspect that makes all of these relative truths, contingent truths, is that this is based on a sort of a correspondence theory of truth. All of Western philosophy pretty much works on a correspondence theory of truth, and really most philosophies, and not even just West, but even East and around the world. What this means simply is that our understanding of what truth is, it's like we have a sense of an objective external reality out there somewhere, the way things actually are. And then we have what humans can know about it and think about it. And then what we say, well, the stuff that we know, which is true, is that which corresponds with what's out there in the real world. And then that stuff which we tell ourselves or think to ourselves, which is false, which is not true, is that stuff which does not correspond with the world. So if we say that the sky is blue, but then we go out and we look at it and it turns out to be orange, then there's a lack of correspondence there, and therefore, based on this, we can determine that something is true or false. This whole notion of the correspondence theory of truth is very problematic and tricky. It's not totally false. It's partially correct. The problem with it is, though, is that it's confining truth only to symbols and concepts and mind stuff, right? I want you to notice that there's a very important difference between the actual sky being blue and your thinking or believing that the sky is blue. These are two totally different things. So don't get me wrong. It's not that I'm denying that the sky is blue per se. I'm not denying that. But we have to be very careful to tease apart the typical conflation that we have between the actual being or raw data that is out there, whatever it is, the sky or the Eiffel Tower, versus our affirmation of its truth in our own mind. You see, these are totally different things. So we might imagine, for example, for a donkey, we could imagine the donkey probably sees the sky, and we might even imagine that for the donkey, the sky is probably blue. Reasonable to assume that, given that, mammals have a similar nervous system and so forth. Eyes work the same way, probably between donkeys and humans. It's reasonable to assume. Of course, we don't really know, but we can assume that. And so, how do I explain this? So even though that's true, the donkey does not have in his mind, in his consciousness, the idea that the sky is blue. You see? Even though the sky might be blue for him, that doesn't mean he can affirm the statement in his mind, the sky is blue, nor does he even know what truth is, nor does he even know what the sky is or what a color is. Okay, this is very important. It might seem like I'm just making some hair-splitting semantic distinctions here, but this is very important to understand. There's a very big difference. That thing, which is blue, might be there for the donkey. But when we say the sky is blue is true, that's an additional layer of cognitive stuff that we're adding on to what was there originally. See? Even like for a human baby, he can see a blue sky, but he's not going to know anything about it, nor can he say that that statement is true. See, that's important. So what you need to see here is that relative truths are second order. It's something your mind is doing on top of the reality which is there. And also it's important to note that relative truth has an opposite, which is namely falsehood. And we tend to think in terms of this duality. Something is true or something is false, and then it must be either true or it must be false. Well, that's going to fly out the window when we get to absolute truth. So all of that stuff I've been talking about, that's not really truth. Now let's get to actual truth. Truth with a capital T, absolute truth. What is this? Well, it's tricky. And the best way to show it to you is not by talking, but through a little exercise. So take out your hand. Do this with me right now. Take out your hand. Put it in front of your face about a foot or two away. Focus your eyes on it and look at it. And just become conscious of the fact that there's a hand here or some kind of object that you're looking at. And I want you to really train your consciousness on the fact that this hand exists right now. It's real. This is real. This is as real gets. You're experiencing it right now. That is absolute truth. Now, widen your gaze and look around the room that you're sitting in. Look around. See what's here. Look up and down and side to side. Actually do this with me. And just become conscious right now. Get out of your mind and just become conscious that reality is happening right here. This is reality. This is as real as reality gets. It can't get any realer than this. Be conscious of it, of the entire room. Be conscious of the entire room. That's absolute truth. But of course you wonder, well, Leo, so what? This is not a big deal. Who cares? I already knew that. No, you didn't. And you still don't. You still don't. I'm trying to point you to what it is, but that doesn't mean you're conscious of what it is. I'm just pointing you to it. We got more to talk about here, so stay patient with me here. This is leading somewhere. So what humans conventionally call experience, our most intimate personal experience, is absolute truth, except with a very deceptive wrinkle, which is that experience, what we traditionally call experience, is not what you think it is. It's something else. And that's what I need to explain to you here. But before I do that, though, what I'm saying is that everything that happens to you, everything that you experience, is absolute truth. In other words, if something is happening to you, it must be the truth. Interesting. Leo, why do you call it the truth and not just experience then? And Leo, how can you trust experience? How do you know it's the truth? These are all very good questions that we're going to answer as we keep going here. But let me tell you this. Truth is simply that which is the case. If you want a definition for what truth is, it's that which is the case. Or actually, we could even remove one word from that definition. We could just say, truth is simply that which is. Well, that's removing two words. That which is the case, or that which is. Truth is isness itself. Truth is being. Truth is actuality. Truth is reality. Truth is direct experience. That's what truth is. But the trick is, what is isness? What is being? What is actuality? What is reality? What is direct experience? What is existence? So the question of what is truth is identical to the question of what is any of these other things that I just mentioned. What is existence? What is reality? What is isness? Have you ever wondered what is ising? What does it mean to is? Now you might think, well, Leo, this is just a silly word game. Nobody knows how to answer this. It's just, you can't really define what isness is. But have you thought about what that means? This is a very profound direction that we're going in that people usually don't go in. They usually don't question reality this deeply. And it's tricky. How do you answer the question of what is isness? It might seem like that's impossible to answer that. And yet what I'm telling you is that it is possible. And I'm telling you that right now, you haven't answered it. You don't understand what isness is. Which is why I need to have this conversation. And which is why this conversation is not just mental masturbation, but it's actually practical. It'll actually lead you somewhere. I'm not wasting your time here, believe me, on that front. I wouldn't be doing this if this was just all a word game. And you might want to go into the dictionary and check what does the dictionary say isness is. Look up is in the dictionary. What will they tell you? You'll immediately find there's going to be a problem there. How do you define isness? It seems like isness is something so fundamental, so rock bottom to our experience of life that you can't even define it with words because words just aren't fundamental enough to tell you what isness is, because words themselves are ising. So any words that you use to explain what isness is, they have to be, they have to is. And in fact, do you have experience of anything that isn't ising? Some food for thought for you. Truth is the actual state of reality at all points in space and time. Truth is not your knowledge of reality. Truth is actual reality, of which knowledge is one part. This is where it gets tricky. So I'm not saying that knowledge is separate from truth. I'm saying that there is actual reality. Then there's a second order knowledge of reality, but that's still part of reality because knowledge is within reality, because everything is within reality, because the term reality includes everything. It's one of those tricky terms that expands to include everything that's real. So truth is reality itself. So you see, the problem with using knowledge to get at the truth is that knowledge itself leads to a sort of self-reference problem, because you're trying to use knowledge to get around at itself, but knowledge is part of the thing you're trying to question, so it's like you're trying to use a finger to point back at the finger. You can't do it, though. See? That's because we've hit rock bottom. You can't go any lower than truth. You can't go any lower than reality. You can't go any lower than ising. So it's so tricky to explain what truth is, because it defies explanation. That's our problem here. But basically what I want to convince you of, or suggest to you rather, is that think of the universe as if it's sort of like, you could say, a machine, and it can have any kind of state it wants. Like, let's say it's a computer hard drive. A computer hard drive has bits, ones and zeros, and you can flip those bits on and off, 1 or 0, and through this you can get different states of the hard drive, and there are trillions of different states that every hard drive can take. Well, imagine that reality is like that, except it has no boundaries, so it's infinite in all directions. There's not a limit to how many bits there are in reality, because reality has an infinite number of bits. And so the truth would be the state of all the bits in the system. Whatever it is. It doesn't matter which bits are turned on or off. The truth is whatever bits are on, and whatever bits are off, and that's the whole state. It defines the whole state of everything that is. That's what absolute truth means. And part of that state that is this present moment right here, right now. So what I'm telling you is that reality is not made out of atoms, the way that science says. Reality is made out of truth. Let me repeat that. Reality is not made out of atoms. Reality is made out of truth. But what is truth? So see, we're trying to dig deeper here. We're trying to understand, what is reality made out of? You're trying to understand what is the very substance of the bits of which reality is made. Because, if we're considering a hard drive, you can say, well, Leo, but the bits in a hard drive, what are the bits in a hard drive really made out of? And, you take a microscope and you zoom in on it, you'll see some sort of circuitry, some sort of silicon chips and whatnot. I don't really know what they make the memory out of, some sort of silicon, I assume, flash memory or spinning disks with some sort of magnetic coating on it. What's the magnetic coating made of? Iron, I guess, some sort of iron film on top of some sort of plastic, or I don't know what they use, copper in a hard drive, the spinning hard drives. So you might say, well, so Leo, so in a hard drive, in your analogy here, in a hard drive, the bits are literally made out of what? Like some sort of iron particles, right? If we get to the bottom of it, it's iron particles. But then you're saying that reality is made out of truth. How can reality be made out of truth? What are the iron filings made out of? Well, that's exactly our problem here, you see. The lower you go, the more fundamental you get. At some point, you're going to have to hit rock bottom. And the problem here is that we get the self-reference problem. We get strange loops as we try to go deeper and deeper. We get paradoxes as we try to understand reality at the deepest level. The reason we get these self-reference paradoxes, which I talked about before in my Reality is a Strange Loop episode, and I talked about before in the metaphysical implications of Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I talked about these strange loops. These strange loops result because of a self-reference problem, and that is that, look, when I'm sitting here or you're sitting there trying to understand what truth is, the problem is that we ourselves are part of the truth that we're trying to describe, which will necessarily lead to a self-reference problem and a paradox. Because, again, the finger can't really point at itself. And so this might make you think, well, okay, Leo, so I guess we're stuck. Like, we can't ever figure out what the truth is. Except we can. There's a paradox within a paradox. The paradox is that it seems impossible to understand the truth, but actually it's possible. It just requires a radical new state of consciousness. It requires an epiphany. It requires an insight. It requires an awakening. So yes, in that hard drive, those bits, let's say, are made of iron atoms. But then what are atoms made out of? Quarks. And what are quarks made out of? Something smaller, strings. And what are strings made out of? What? See, science can't answer these questions because of the self-reference problem. But you can go beyond science, and you can go beyond the self-reference problem, and you can realize that what everything is ultimately made out of, including atoms, strings, molecules, hard drives, humans, animals, space, time, and everything else is made out of truth. I also want you to notice an interesting thing. In this sort of model that we have, where reality is these bits that are turned on and off, if we turn all the bits off to zero, that's still going to be truth. So what I want you to notice is that it's impossible to escape truth. Truth is always the case, because truth is not dependent upon any particular state of this system. It doesn't matter if all the bits are off, or all of them are on, or whatever combination of bits in between is on and off and all this. It doesn't matter. That is the state of reality. So we're actually talking about the entire state of the entire universe, and not just at this point in time, but all points in time and all points in space. And not just this universe, but all multiverses, everything, every last fucking thing that could ever possibly be, whatever it is, whatever it was, whatever it will be, that's the absolute truth. Remember, the definition of truth is that which is the case. That means if you're sitting here and you've got an itch on your ass, that is the case. That is truth. That's why it's happening to you. If it wasn't the truth, you couldn't experience it. It couldn't be happening to you. And this goes for everything that you've ever experienced in your life. And anything that ever happened in history or will ever happen in the future. So if you want to think of it from God's point of view, so to speak, imagine God sitting outside the universe somehow and looking down upon it, as if that was possible, looking down upon it and seeing the entire state of everything within creation that has ever happened. And that entire snapshot of the state of all of creation, that would be the absolute truth. But also, not just the big picture, but also the small picture. So if God sort of took a telescope and zoomed in, or a microscope and zoomed into the universe and, looked at one little particle on one little leaf, on one tree, on one planet, in one galaxy on Earth, let's say, looks at this little leaf, looks at the particle, zooms in on that, whatever that's being shown to him, that is also part of the absolute truth. You see, because the big picture is simply the summation of all the little pictures, you might say. Every molecule that you can zoom into is part of the big picture. Just like the big picture is all of it at once. Now, let's consider the following example. I'm going to show you here an equation on the screen. 1 + 1 = 3. And now I have a question for you. Is this the truth? Careful, it's a trick question. Is this the truth? What do you think? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Now, I deliberately picked this example because it's tricky, and I want to illustrate the point. So stick with me, try to understand what I'm trying to say here. It's a little difficult to get it across. What I'm saying here is not that 1 + 1 actually equals 3 in the symbolic sense that you're looking at these symbols and trying to interpret the meaning. I'm trying to get underneath that. I'm trying to help you to get underneath that, to realize that there's something more fundamental about this equation than its meaning or its symbols are trying to convey. So yes, ordinarily we would say 1 + 1 = 3 is false because we're interpreting that from the symbolic level. But what I'm trying to get you to do is to realize that that symbolic interpretation and that symbolic falsehood, that's a second order relative thing. There's something more fundamental happening, which we call truth, which is the isness or the being or the very experience of the equation that's written here. So in this sense, I say that it's truth. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying it is truth. Are you catching that subtle difference? To understand this, you have to stop looking at this equation symbolically or what it means, because the symbolism and the meaning of it is second order. before you can have a symbol that you can interpret and you can analyze whether it's true or false or whatever else, what other kind of meaning you want to give it, first, of course, you understand that the symbol has to exist. It has to is. It has to be. And for it to be, it must be part of the truth. See, it's not the whole truth. Remember, I didn't say that this is the whole truth. It is the truth, but the truth includes all the little parts. So this is one little part of the ultimate truth, the ultimate big picture. You see, so somewhere in the universe right now, obviously there exists 1 + 1 = 3, namely on your screen right here. You're looking at it, you're experiencing it. So obviously it exists for you. Obviously it's true for you. It is the case. That's how this is part of the truth, the absolute truth. So what we're doing here is we're distinguishing between knowledge and isness. And now here's the real mind fuck that I want you to understand, is that false things must also exist. In fact, the very concept and notion of falsehood, which we ordinarily think is the opposite of truth, actually exists. It must exist because the only thing that exists are things that exist. So the only way you can think of the concept of falsehood is because it exists in your mind right now. It is the case. The concept of falsehood is the case. Are you getting that? You can't escape truth. Falsehood is a second-order relativistic thing, not a first-order thing. As far as first-order things go, the rock bottom of what reality consists of is only truth. Truth as an absolute. Truth with no opposite. There is no opposite to absolute truth. Absolute truth does not know falsehood. There actually isn't any falsehood in reality. There's only falsehood as a concept. There is no such thing as non-existence. In actuality, there's only non-existence as a concept. You see, to even think of non-existence, that idea has to exist. To even say that a statement is false, the statement has to exist, and you saying that it's false has to exist. These are not just word games. I'm saying something very profound here that you need to grasp at a level deeper than merely language and deeper than logic. I want you to see that non-existence is impossible. I want you to see that falsehood is impossible. Now, of course, you're suspicious, and you're right to be suspicious. You can be all suspicious of me as much as you want, because what I'm saying is not based on a belief system or an ideology that I have. What I'm saying is the truth. It's actually what's happening. It's actually what is the case. I'm explaining to you precisely how your experience works. Okay. In your experience, there actually is no such thing as non-existence. There is only existence. But you raise the objection, but Leo, this doesn't make any sense because look, like I'm looking at you right now, let's say, for example, and I'm seeing you, of course you exist, and I'm seeing the stuff around you. This is all real. Okay, we can agree on that. It exists. But what about a kangaroo? Like, Leo, there's no kangaroo right here, right now. So look, the kangaroo doesn't exist. Good, let's go with that example. So notice what is actually happening there. You're actually getting lost in concept, but you're not aware of how you're getting lost in concept with this kangaroo. So what's actually happening is that you're imagining a kangaroo in your mind, that image of the kangaroo exists as an image in your mind. And then, furthermore, you're projecting that image onto what is happening here on this screen before you. And then you're kind of imagining like a kangaroo could potentially exist here somewhere. Maybe a kangaroo could be sitting on my head. You could imagine that. And then, furthermore, you say to yourself, well, but yeah, that could be the case, but it isn't the case. And therefore, the statement that there's a kangaroo on Leo's head is false. And therefore, the kangaroo doesn't exist. But all of that whole chain of mental, I don't know, what do you call it? Mental work, mental gymnastics that you're doing. All that conceptualizing that you're doing there in that scenario, all of it exists. So what is really happening when you think that non-existence is real is that you're fooling yourself. It's like an optical illusion. You're fooling yourself using your mind. Your mind is running through these cycles, through these loops, and it's losing track of these loops, and it's forgetting that really what it's doing is that it's creating, your mind is literally creating the idea of non-existence. But to create the idea of non-existence, it has to exist. So you're literally bringing non-existence into existence as a concept, not as actuality, because in actuality, there cannot be non-existence. You see, there's only truth. There's no such thing as falsehood. Falsehood is a conceptual, second-order phenomenon. Pretty cool, huh? Interesting. Interesting. How about your death? What is your death? If non-existence isn't real, is your death real? Can you die? What is your death? Is your death actually something truthful? Is it actually a case, a fact? Or is it something that you're imagining? Something conceptual and something second order? See, now we get into some interesting possibilities all of a sudden. Now all of a sudden the possibility opens up that maybe death isn't what you thought it was. Maybe death isn't as final as you thought it was. Interesting. But you still might be asking, Leo, but what is truth itself? You still haven't told me. You're playing these word games, and it's like, yeah, I'm looking at my hand right now, and you said my hand is the truth. Look at your hand. But what are you really looking at? What is it? What is isness? What is existence? What does it mean to say that something is true? Well, I'm not being slippery on purpose here, even though it might sound that way. This is just the very nature of the limitations of language. And not just language, but logic and the human mind. You see, we're getting so deep that we're starting to transcend language and we're running into paradox. What truth is cannot be told to you because it's already right in front of you right now, and yet you're still not getting it. See, the only one who can grasp what truth is you. I can't do it for you. Only you can do it for you. Because the truth is intimate. It's infused directly into your state of being and your state of consciousness. The truth is not some foreign object that we can look upon with a telescope or a microscope and we can analyze it as though we're some sort of impartial observer. We are intimately interwoven with the very thing that we're trying to understand here. So if you're asking me to tell you what the truth is, you fundamentally misunderstand what the truth is. because I can't tell you what the truth is, because the truth is right in front of you. And any word that I say will just be more truth, more parts of the truth, more isness. I'm ising at you here. This entire video, I'm just ising at you, but you don't know what isness is. So how do you find out? Well, you is. You're ising. Put your awareness on ising itself and keep it there, and keep it there, and keep it there, and keep it there until you get very bored and frustrated, and keep it there some more, and keep it there some more, and keep it there for 10 hours, keep it there for 100 hours, keep it there for 1,000 hours, keep it there for 5,000 hours. And at some point, it will dawn upon you what isness is. And that will be a revolutionary discovery for you. Even though really nothing will change. The colors and sights and sounds of this room will still all be the same. Nothing will really change. Yet at the same time, everything will change, because suddenly you will understand in one fell swoop what existence is. You see, the problem here is that it's like I'm trying to explain to a donkey what his reflection is in the mirror. I'm trying to get him to recognize his reflection. And I have this giant mirror, and I'm holding up in front of the donkey, and I'm pointing to the mirror, the image. Here's the donkey's reflection, and then I'm grabbing the donkey by the ears. I'm pulling it. I'm saying, "Hey, look, stupid! Look at your face. This is you. Look, you. This is you." I'm doing this. I'm yelling at the donkey, but the donkey's standing there giving me a stupid look, and he just doesn't understand. And nothing I say or do will make him understand unless he has a massive epiphany and a sudden insight or a realization of like, oh, that's me. Oh, like that. That's our communication gap here. See, you are that donkey. People take for granted the ability to recognize one's image or reflection in a mirror. This is a highly sophisticated thing that only the most advanced life forms can do. Most animals on this planet cannot do it. Chimps can do it. I think dolphins can do it. A few other animals can do it. Ravens, I think, can do it, and a few others. But most animals can't do it. They're not conscious enough. Likewise, most humans are not conscious enough to recognize what isness is, what truth is. And so, because of this, it seems impossible. But then again, plenty of people have done it, so you can do it. It's just that it takes some work. It's not a biological thing. It takes work. It takes practice. You cannot understand what truth is without a massive awakening. It's also impossible to know what the truth is without knowing what the truth is. It's catch-22. To know what the truth is, you have to already know what the truth is. If you knew what the truth was, you wouldn't need to watch this episode. And if you don't know what the truth is and you watch this episode, you still won't know what the truth is. So how do you get to the truth? Well, you can't get to it because it's already here. It's already here. You're just not recognizing it. It's a function of recognition. It's a lack of consciousness. That's the problem. It's not a lack of proof. It's not a lack of evidence. It's not a lack of logic. It's a lack of consciousness on your part. Truth is not something your brain is thinking or holding. Truth is not something your mind is doing. Truth isn't a thought. A thought is part of the truth. I want you to consider the following interesting scenario. if the entire universe was destroyed, the truth would still exist. What? Leo, how could that be so? Because the truth would be that there is no universe. You see, the truth becomes whatever is the case. Remember what I said? Truth is that which is the case. So if it is the case that there is no universe, that's the case. That's the truth. If it is the case that there is a universe, that's the truth. See, truth is a really slippery beast. You might think, well, Leo, but what if there just isn't any truth? But you see, you contradict yourself. If you imagine a scenario in which, like, let's say you imagine an alternate universe where there never was any truth at all, a non-truth universe. If that's the case, then that would be the truth. The truth would be that there is no truth. See, in this way, like I said before, the truth is inescapable and it's absolute. You cannot destroy the truth because destruction itself must be the case. If you imagine destruction, if destruction happens, then that's what happens, and that's what the truth is. The truth doesn't care about the details of the universe. The truth, like that hard drive I was talking about, it doesn't matter if you flip all the bits to off. That doesn't bother the hard drive. It's just in that state. It's sort of in an off state. So the universe can be in an off state or in an on state or anywhere in between. It doesn't matter. That's what it is. And it is that. So when we say that there is no universe, you might say, well, it's been destroyed and therefore there exists nothing. But be very, very careful about how you're thinking about this. In that example, there literally exists nothing, which is not the same thing as non-existence. Because remember, non-existence isn't a real thing. Non-existence is a concept. Non-existence has to exist as a concept for there to be non-existence. So if you actually completely wipe the universe clean to just a completely blank slate, what you're left with is not non-existence. What you're left with is pure empty existence, pure isness, pure formlessness, which is pure absolute truth, which exists. It exists because it is existence itself. It is what is the case. Truth is not a linguistic or a semantic notion. All things and all concepts depend upon their first being truth. Truth is prior to everything else, including all physical objects, time, space, and the universe. In fact, all those objects, time, space, and the universe, energy, matter, and all of that, that is just an aspect of the ultimate truth. Now, let's address another important objection that you probably have, which is the one about experience. So you might even be agreeing with various things that I'm saying here, but then, of course, you're coming from the materialist paradigm, so you have to bring up the objection of subjective experience. Something along the lines of, well, but Leo, yeah, okay, you're describing our experiences here, and maybe our experience, our human experience does work this way that you're talking about, but this is just human experience, human perception. Why are you placing so much importance on human perception? It's just human perception. People can hallucinate stuff and, this isn't the real world. The real world is out there. Behind the curtain of Perception. How do we know what that is? Here is where the ego comes in. The problem is that the ego has co-opted absolute truth or isness or being and has turned it into a conceptual amalgam that we call conventionally experience. There actually is no such thing as experience or perception. As I have explained in my episode, What is Perception? Go check that out for a detailed explanation. But there is no such thing as perception or experience. There is only absolute truth. Perception and experience is a second order thing that the mind projects onto the truth. It's an illusion, it's a delusion, you might say, because you're committed to the idea that you exist. So because you think you were born and because you think you exist as a human, as a biological entity, you think that this truth here is somehow happening to you through a system of perception. There's sense organs, there's light molecules bouncing forth, photons and so forth, bouncing into your eye, getting interpreted. The mind is creating all of this whole scheme that you have learned from science and from culture. This is all a self-involved fantasy that allows you to believe that you exist as a human being, as a biological creature that was born in time and in space. That's the ego. That's you. That's what you think you are. So right now I'm telling you that you're not real. So to understand what truth is, you would have to stop believing that you're real, which explains why truth is so rare, and which explains why truth is so little understood by human beings, which explains why scientists don't know what the truth is, why philosophers don't know what the truth is, why many spiritual people don't know what the truth is, because they're committed to their existence. And the only way you will understand what the truth is by realizing that you're not real. So what is the thing that's preventing you from realizing everything I'm saying in this episode? It's your insistence that you're real. It's your insistence that you're a human, that you're a biological entity. That's an illusion. There are no biological entities. There are no sense organs. There is no such thing as perception. There is only absolute truth. And there is no such thing as experience, and there is no such thing as subjectivity. There is only objective, absolute, ultimate truth. This truth is so objective that it's true across the board for the entire universe, for all living beings, because all living beings are illusions. So here's the trick that your mind has been playing on you. It's been telling you that this world of colors and sights and sounds and ideas and personal feelings and emotions and pains and suffering and all of this human, all of this animal stuff that you thought you were experiencing, which wasn't the actual real world. You thought the real world was somewhere behind a curtain. This is the real world. This is the universe. This is reality. The universe, reality, is acting like a human or like an animal, and it's having feelings and sensations. It can get horny and hungry, and it can cry, and it can get angry and pissed off, and it can get its feelings hurt. It can be happy, it can be sad, it can be depressed. The universe can be all these things. The universe is all these things because look, here it is. You're doing it. Actually, you're not doing it. It is doing you. Are you getting this? Make sure you don't misunderstand me. When I say that there's no such thing as experience or perception, I am not saying that if you realize this, that all the colors and sights and sounds will disappear. All the emotions and feelings will disappear, and you will be in some sort of black hole. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying all the colors and sights and sounds and feelings and emotions will all be here exactly like they were before. But the only thing that will be missing is you. You will be gone. You. So imagine that we took the universe and we kept it precisely as it is. We took your entire perceptual field that you thought was the perceptual field, and we keep it precisely as it is. Nothing changes. But the only thing we do is we take a magic wand and we hit you over the head and you disappear. You disappear. I don't mean your body doesn't disappear. You disappear. That thing you think you are inside the body, that thing I'm pointing at, that right there, that's not the body. Nor is that colors or sounds or shapes or feelings. The thing that is experiencing all the colors and sights and feelings, the thing that I'm pointing my finger at right now, that thing that you think is you, that thing that you think is going to die, that thing you think was born, that thing. Imagine that we got rid of that thing and everything else stayed the same. Are you getting that? Then what would happen if we could get rid of that thing is that experience would be recontextualized, perception would be recontextualized into pure, objective, absolute truth. Subjectivity would disappear from the universe. There is no such thing as subjectivity unless you imagine that you exist. So if you're wondering, well, Leo, how is it possible that a human being could access absolute truth, objective truth? It seems impossible because we're stuck in subjectivity. But what you're not realizing is that you're only stuck in subjectivity because you imagine that you're a subject. Stop imagining that you're a subject, and subjectivity will cease to exist, and then you will be left with pure objectivity. What you thought was subjectivity will become objectivity. And through this way, we can access absolute truth, even though we're just mere humans. Of course, the reality is that we're not mere humans. We imagine that we're humans. If we were actually humans, you're right, we could never access absolute truth. Fortunately enough for us, we're not humans because humans are imaginary. It's a lot to take in, I understand. You know, it's a lot to take in. But there's no other way. Let's just go for it directly. Why beat around the bush, right? By the way, if you're having an emotional reaction against this, notice that your mind is designed with elaborate, sophisticated, ingenious defense mechanisms to prevent you from understanding what I'm saying. So if you get angry, depressed, fearful, if your heart starts to pound and race, if you get a little panic attack, if you get a little taste of existential terror, you're right on the right track. Those are defense mechanisms. Fear is a defense mechanism. Anger is a defense mechanism. Criticism of me is a defense mechanism. Every reaction you have against this information is a defense mechanism that is trying to distract you from the truth penetrating right through you and annihilating you. See? Because you're trying to survive. The truth is that you're not interested in the truth. You're interested in survival. And it's hard to bust through that veil of disinterest that you have. Contrary to what many Western philosophers believe, the truth is not an epistemological notion. Truth is actually metaphysical. But also, really what happens is that metaphysics and epistemology, as a duality, these two, they must be reconciled and they must interpenetrate and unify into one. And so that's what happens in non-duality. That's what happens in a non-dual state. Truth is non-dual. Truth is the unification of all dualities. And so what we're doing when we're eliminating the the you, we're eliminating the experiencer of experience. We're eliminating the perceiver of perception, such that all that remains is just pure experience or pure perception. But what is pure experience or pure perception? It's absolute truth. Here are some interesting features of absolute truth. Absolute truth has no opposite. Absolute truth cannot be proven by scientific experiment. Absolute truth cannot be captured in a symbol. Absolute truth cannot be captured in a mathematical equation. Absolute truth cannot be quantified, enumerated, or formalized in any way. Absolute truth cannot be communicated. Absolute truth cannot be taught. Absolute truth is infinite. Absolute truth is one, singular, total. Absolute truth is utterly paradoxical and illogical, and it makes no sense to the mind. Absolute truth must necessarily negate itself. Any quality that you ascribe to absolute truth is both true and false, and both and neither. That's the paradoxical nature of truth. Because absolute truth possesses all qualities, including the quality of having no quality. And so when you ask, what is isness? What is existence? What is truth? Leo, what is it? You still haven't told me what it is. It's nothing. There isn't anything there. It's consciousness. Consciousness is nothing. Right now, put your consciousness on your consciousness. Put your awareness on your awareness. And ask yourself, what is awareness? What is this mysterious thing called awareness? Do it right now. And notice that there's nothing there. That's pure existence, pure isness, pure truth. Awareness. You can't find any form or quality to awareness because the quality of awareness is that it has no qualities. But also it has all qualities and all forms. See? It goes full circle. It's very paradoxical. Don't worry if you're not getting it. This is, like I said, this is some of the most advanced stuff that you'll ever hear me say. This is one of the most advanced teachings that you could hear as a human being. This is very tricky stuff. So it'll probably take you years to understand everything I say here. Don't worry about that. You know, we got to just start somewhere. Just jump right in. Try to figure it out. And then, you know, some of you will actually get it. You might be lucky and you'll get it for a second and then you'll lose it. That's usually how it works. You'll get it for a split second or you get it for a minute and then you lose it. Don't worry about that too. That's all just part of the process. You're gonna have to keep piercing through that veil over and over and over again until this understanding stabilizes. We're just getting you started. Here are some other aspects, some important aspects of truth. Truth is consciousness. Truth is the whole universe. Truth is God. Truth is love. Truth is uncaused, amechanical, and self-created. Truth is eternal, meaning that it's outside of time. Truth is not localized. It's not limited to space. Truth is intelligent and sentient. Truth is good, absolute good with a capital G. Truth has no beginning or end. There is nothing beyond the absolute truth. Truth is everything and simultaneously nothing. Truth is form and formlessness. Truth includes all dualities and distinctions and differences. Truth is all-powerful. It creates everything because it is everything. Truth is now. The present moment of now is the truth. Truth is impossible to avoid. Truth is mysterious and mystical by its very nature. Truth is not knowing. Truth is utter mindfuckery. Truth is enormous. Truth is life transforming. Truth is so important that it is beyond importance. Truth is so meaningful that it is beyond meaning. Truth is life and death. Truth is the only thing there is and could ever be. Truth cannot be turned into an ideology. Truth is radical. Truth is awesome and terrifying at the same time. Truth is paradise and total perfection. Truth is self-awareness. Truth is self-illuminating, self-knowing, and self-evident. Truth is omniscience. Truth is totally direct. It has zero process, method, or mechanism. Truth is the solution to all human problems. Truth is the aim of all philosophy and spirituality. Truth has many practical implications, which I won't be getting into in this episode, but just know that they exist. Many, many practical implications. Truth is you. You are the truth. Truth is not something you think or know. Truth is what you are. Pretty cool, huh? Now, I said a lot of deep stuff there. I equated truth with many different things, and you're probably scratching your head about some of those. And I just don't have enough time right now to go into detail on each one of those things that I equated truth with. Just know that what I said is correct. If you investigate this stuff for yourself for years, eventually, maybe after a decade or two, you will discover that everything I just said in that list is correct. But you're going to have to really work at it. One of the tricks with truth is that it's multidimensional. It's got layers to it. It's got aspects to it. It's got degrees to it. And so what that means is that even if you understand one aspect of the truth, it doesn't mean you understand all the aspects of the truth. There's a lot there. So I threw a lot of different aspects at you. Some of them might still be mysterious and puzzling and confusing to you. That's okay. Just understand that I'm just kind of giving you a roadmap, a high-level roadmap that you'll use for a decade going forward in your work. So now let's do a little FAQ. First question. Leo, where did the truth come from? Like, how did it get here? It must have come from somewhere, right? Who created it? Was it the Big Bang? Was it God? What? It didn't come from anywhere because anywhere it might have come from is a place that you have to imagine. And anywhere it goes to is also a place, so you need two places. But these two places, they are the case. Remember, anything that is the case is the truth. So if there are two places, that already is the truth. So where do those two cases come from? Nowhere. Not only are they coming from nowhere, they are nowhere now. Everywhere is nowhere. No when, no how, no thing. The truth is nothing, which is everything, which is infinity, which is what all of this is. What is infinity? Everything that's precisely happening right now, exactly as it is. And the way that it's always happened throughout the whole universe, throughout all of human history, that is infinity. Everything is infinity. The definition of infinity is your life. You're living it. You're living through infinity. Your life is like one wormhole through a giant ball of infinity. This is what infinity looks like. Your life, my life, your parents' life, your dog's life, and so forth. That's infinity. Where did it come from? It didn't come from anywhere because it's actually nowhere and it's nothing. And how is that possible? It's possible because there's no difference between possible and impossible. And that's God. Where did God come from? God always was. It's eternity. It existed forever. It can't go anywhere because it has nowhere to go, because for it to go somewhere, it would need to have somewhere to go. But how can I have somewhere to go if that somewhere to go is already part of it? See? Can't go anywhere. It's stuck. It's stuck for eternity. You're stuck here for eternity. You exist forever. Sorry to break it to you. Next question. But Leo, what if you're deluded? All of this sounds nice, but couldn't you be wrong? You talk about LSD and psychedelics. Isn't that just delusions? Yeah, there's just no way to get around it. You see, the problem here is that it's like, you're sort of like that donkey. I'm pointing to your reflection in the mirror. I'm showing you the reflection. And you're asking me, but Leo, what if you're deluded? What if I'm not the donkey? What if I'm not the reflection? And how do you answer that? You can't answer it. It just is what it is. You can't explain truth any further. Truth is the most fundamental thing there is. So I understand if you think I'm deluded. You might have your reasons for believing that. I totally understand. But the truth is just the truth. I can't really, come up with a little story for you, do a little song and dance for you to convince you. I mean, what is this? This is not what we're doing here. What I'm doing here is I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm trying to just show you things that you're overlooking, the most obvious things that you're overlooking in your direct experience right now. And so my claim is that if you want to know what I know, just do the things that I tell you to do, use the techniques I tell you to use, and you will come to know the things that I know. Right? It's not complicated. This is exactly how science works. Like if a scientist tells you that there's a new planet that he discovered in our solar system, an 11th planet or whatever, and you tell him, well, but what if you're deluded? The scientist will say, well, look here, I have a microscope or a telescope. Go look into the telescope, and there it is. And if you tell him, but what if you're deluded about telescopes? What if telescopes are delusionary? Well, nobody can help you, dude. If that's your position, you can't be helped. You're stuck. You're fucked. You're like that donkey who can't understand. See? What you need to be much more worried about is not my own delusions, but yours. What if you're deluded? What if this is the absolute truth, exactly like I'm telling you, but you're so deluded, you're so attached to being yourself that you think this is all subjective. You think this is your personal experience. Yeah, you know what that's called? That's called egotism. That is the very heart of delusion. So the irony is that you're projecting your own delusion onto me. What I'm telling you, what I'm pointing you to is absolute truth. But you're too deluded to understand it, therefore you call me deluded. That's a defense mechanism. We already talked about those. Next question. But Leo, what if there's something beyond absolute truth? Aha, I have you, Leo. How do you know? How can you possibly know that there can't be something beyond absolute truth? You can only ask this question when you don't know and aren't conscious of the absolute truth. Absolute truth is infinity. It's boundless. It's everything. There can't be anything beyond it because it is all things. You got to understand that. If you don't understand that, then to you, you have absolute truth as a concept in your mind. When you have absolute truth as a concept in your mind, then yeah, you can imagine something beyond it. But that's because you didn't actually have full consciousness of it. It was just a concept in your mind. Of course, you can have another concept in your mind. But what I'm telling you is that absolute truth is the sum total of all possible concepts that you could ever have. So if you can imagine something beyond absolute truth is that. It includes that already. And if you can imagine something beyond that, it includes that as well. It includes everything you could possibly imagine because it is your very imagination. The imagination you're using to come up with these objections is itself the absolute truth. That doesn't mean your objections are true. It just means that you're deluded. You're confusing conceptual truths with absolute truth. Next question. But Leo, how come science doesn't validate what you're saying? What you're saying here sounds so radical and it sounds so significant and important that surely if this was true, you would get like a Nobel Prize or something, right? But who would give me a Nobel Prize? if the people handing out the Nobel Prize are themselves unaware of what truth is? How are they going to validate what I'm saying? They can't. The very nature of truth is that it can't be validated because it's you. You got to get it. You got to get it. It's sort of like you're asking, imagine that donkey. Imagine if that donkey could talk, and he was very skeptical about this idea that this image in the mirror is actually him. So he was talking back to me and, coming up with cute objections. And one of his objections was something like this: well, Leo, if that image in the mirror really was me, if I was that donkey, then this is the most radical discovery ever. You should get a Nobel Prize for that. Why don't you get a Nobel Prize? Well, because the people who are running the Nobel Prize committee are also fucking donkeys just like you. And when I show them the mirror, they also will say the same thing. You see, the delusion is so thick that it's very difficult to escape. You can't depend upon other human beings validating this for you. Sorry. That's not how truth works. Why do you assume it should work that way? What if absolute truth is only something you can access personally yourself? What if that's true? That means that all of your appeals to science, mathematics, professors, popes, and priests, and Zen masters and gurus, none of it will help you. None of it will help you. And that is, in fact, the case. Next question. Leo, what is the relationship between absolute truth and relative truths, like science and mathematics? Are you saying that all of science and math is bullshit? How can that be the case? Because, science and math, they seem to work. We sent a man to the moon, or so people believe, if you're not a conspiracy theorist. Science has accomplished some amazing things. That's true. Science has accomplished some amazing things. And the reason that is because science is full of relative truths. And math is full of relative truths. And relative truths in the relative world, the world that we live our life in, are very handy and useful and important, and they can help you to survive. But it's not absolute truth. Science is not based on absolute truth, because the interesting thing about absolute truth is that it's not necessary to know absolute truth in order to live life, in order to do science, in order to just kind of like engage in the relative world. Knowing the absolute truth is not important for that. But also it is important, because relative truths do have to correspond in some way with absolute truth. There is some sort of tracking that's going on between scientific truth and actual isness and being. When we say that the sky is blue, we are saying some sort of partial truth. We're capturing some essence of the absolute. The absolute is the actual sky and its actual color. But when we have a second order conceptual statement about it, like the sky is blue or whatever, yeah, we're capturing some aspect of it, but never the whole. Relative truths are always finite, and absolute truth is infinite. And so you can keep discovering more and more relative truths till the end of time, and you will never exhaust all of them, nor will you ever get to the absolute. Because the absolute is right here, right now. You don't get to the absolute by an accumulation of relative truths. You get to the absolute by realizing it's everything at once. And science and math are just not in that business. They're in a different business. They're not in the business of finding absolute truth. They're in the business of studying relative minutia in the world. They're in the business of studying form, and all form is relative, contingent. It's changing all the time. It's dependent upon perception and experience and all this. It's dualistic. See, science doesn't care about and doesn't study metaphysics. And what we're talking about here is metaphysics. Yet at the same time, there really isn't a difference between metaphysics and physics, or between your everyday life. Unless you believe there is, which is the case with science. Next question. Well, Leo, it sounds like you're saying that there's two truths. There's the relative and there's the absolute. Isn't that a duality? Shouldn't reality be non-dual like you said all the time in the past? Isn't that the highest truth, that everything's non-dual? But then you posit these two different truths. How can that be? Again, this is the paradoxical nature of truth, is that it's both. It's non-dual and it's dual. Ultimately, when you're at the highest level of non-dual consciousness, there is only one thing. There's only absolute truth. There are really no relative truths. Even all the relative truths sort of collapse into and just become one aspect or facet of the absolute. But most of us, most of the time, are just sort of in an ordinary, conventional, dualistic state of consciousness, and we're just going about our lives. And so, in that sense, it's helpful to talk about the relative and the absolute as though they're two separate things. They're not really two separate things, but it's helpful to distinguish them precisely because we need not only the whole truth, but we also need partial truths. Partial truths are useful for manipulating reality. See, you can't really manipulate reality effectively when you know all of reality as one whole. You can't do anything with it. You got to like break it up into pieces and chunks. Then you can shift those chunks and pieces around in the same way that, if you just have one solid hard drive of like all ones and no zeros, you can't do anything with that hard drive. The function of the hard drive is precisely in that you can subdivide all the different bits into little pieces, and then you can make a very complex soup of ones and zeros, which creates the thing that you're working with, and you can shuffle those around using software, and then that allows your computer to do sophisticated stuff. So that's kind of how science is working, and not just science, but ordinary human life. There's truths within science, there's truths within business, there's truths within relationships, there's truths within your everyday life. Like you can ask your spouse, hey, did you go to the grocery store and pick up the milk? And the spouse can tell you yes or no. And we can correlate that with stuff that's happened, with evidence and all that. That's all relative. But also it's all absolute as well. It's just that the relative is a part of the absolute. It's sort of like if I have my hand here, I can either talk about the entire hand or I can talk about one of the fingers. But the finger is not different from the hand. It's just one part, one aspect of the hand. See? So when I call the finger a hand, I'm not lying. The finger is a hand. It's just a part of the hand. Get that? Next question. Leo, how is absolute truth useful or practical? This is tricky to answer because on the one hand, it's not useful and practical at all. That's not its function. On the other hand, though, what you have to understand is that usefulness and practicality itself is a part of absolute truth. If there was no absolute truth, usefulness and practicality couldn't exist because there would be no world. So if you want to know what is the function of absolute truth, the function of absolute truth is to be the substance of the entire fucking universe. You see, the problem is that when you're in the universe and you take the universe for granted, when you take existence for granted, then you can sit around and you can wonder, well, Leah, what's the usefulness of existence? But do you realize the stupidity of that logic? Because if you're treating existence as though it's not useful, well, that means that the existence of your daughter is not useful. The existence of your parents are not useful. The existence of sex is not useful. That means money doesn't exist and is no longer useful. What is usefulness? Usefulness requires existence. So it's so useful that it's useless. Of course, it goes full circle. The absolute truth is so useful that it's useless, which is precisely why nobody cares about it. Nobody pursues it, and nobody gets it. Next question. Leo, why should I pursue the truth? What's in it for me? First of all, that's a stupid question. what's in it for me. Stop asking what's in it for me all the time. That's your problem right there. You'll fix 50% of your life problems by if you just stop asking what's in it for me. The other answer to your question here is that you shouldn't. There is no should. If you want to pursue the truth, if you're curious, if you're interested, if it's something that appeals to you, then pursue it. And if it doesn't, if you don't give a shit, then don't. Go away, do something else. Go watch some stupid cat videos on YouTube. I won't care. That's what most people do anyways. There is absolutely no reason for why you should pursue the truth. That's the truth. But also, at the same time, I don't want to make it seem as though pursuing the truth is a completely frivolous activity which will not improve your life in any way. It'll improve your life enormously in many ways. And I've talked in past episodes about how awakening can benefit you in various selfish ways. Primarily, the benefit to finding the truth, beyond just the beauty of it and the wonder of it, is that it eliminates suffering. That's probably your most selfish reason to pursue it. Suffering is an illusion. Suffering is falsehood. So when you discover the absolute truth, it cuts out a lot of suffering from your life. And in fact, that's why most people end up discovering the absolute truth. If they do, it's because they suffer so much that the suffering leads them desperately to want to escape it. And so they end up stumbling their way into the truth. Although I don't really recommend that approach. First of all, because it's very painful. Second of all, because there's a higher motivation. If you want to pursue the truth, pursue it because you care about it. Pursue it because you value truth for truth's sake. Pursue it for the beauty. Pursue it for the love of it. Pursue it out of curiosity, not because you want to escape some suffering. Next question. Leo, how can I discover absolute truth for myself? What do I need to do? You need to begin to meditate and develop a laser-focused concentration ability. You need to do yoga. I recommend Kriya Yoga. I've talked about it in the past. I have guides about it on the forum. Go check out the forum where there's some threads about how to begin Kriya Yoga. I have books on my book list about Kriya Yoga. Check that out. Powerful technique. You need to start doing psychedelics. Probably the most powerful technique for discovering absolute truth is psychedelics. You can start doing self-inquiry. You can start contemplating, using a journal. I have an episode about that, how to contemplate using a journal. I also recommend you start to read some books on my book list about truth and about non-duality, about spirituality, and about consciousness. Watch more of my videos. Put in the time and actually do the practices. Meditation, concentration, self-inquiry, psychedelics, yoga. That's basically how you get there. If you're not doing those practices, you'll not get there. So start doing them. And there's other methods. There's a lot of different spiritual techniques out there, but these are the ones I feel are the most powerful, the ones that I'm most familiar with. So that's what I recommend. But you can find crazy stuff like, Jesus supposedly went out into the desert and spent 30 days or 40 days, how long, I don't know. He was out in the desert with no food and no water. That's a classic spiritual technique. It's called the vision quest. That could work. Again, it's very painful. I don't recommend it, but you could do that. Jesus also did baptism. You know what baptism is? Not the shit they do today. Real baptism is when somebody grabs your head, dunks you into a river full of water until you start to choke and suffocate on the water, until you're right at the brink of asphyxiation and death, and then they pull you out. That's real baptism. That's a spiritual technique. Again, I don't recommend you use that. It's kind of dangerous these days, kind of barbaric. But hey, that's what people used in the past to awaken to the truth. Next question, Leo, how will I know that I've actually discovered the absolute truth and that I'm not just deluding myself? That's a very good question. It certainly is possible to delude yourself as you go about pursuing absolute truth. But at the same time, there is a moment where you will actually have a genuine, authentic awakening to the absolute truth, and it will be self-evident. You will know it because you will be it. It is self-validating. It is the highest authority in the universe because it's the entire universe. What other authority do you want? Do you want the Pope to come validate your awakening? You don't need it. By the time you're awake, you don't need anyone to validate your awakening. But until you get there, yeah, you could delude yourself, so be careful. Don't worry, it's going to be a massive, massive, massive epiphany. When you understand absolute truth, you understand the entire universe in a sense. That's a big deal. Very big deal. It's not something that you just like accidentally it happens to you and then you sleep through it. And it's like, damn it, Leo, I awoke to the absolute truth, but I slept through it, or I was just distracted watching television or something. My dog was barking. I overlooked it, and now I don't know what it is. Like, it doesn't work this way. Next question, Leo, how can a psychedelic reveal the absolute truth? Isn't psychedelics just a chemical in the brain? No, it's not. You think that a psychedelic is a chemical in the brain, but a psychedelic has nothing really to do with chemicals or brains. It just does. The answer is it just does. It won't make sense to you. Try it and you'll see it. The proof is in the test. Run the test and see what happens. I will guarantee you that if you do enough psychedelics, you will be revealed the absolute truth. It's just the case. It's just a fact. I can't give you a little cute story about why it is the way it is. It just is this fucking way. And it can't be explained to you because you're not awake. Once you awaken, then you'll understand. And it'll be so shocking that you'll understand why I couldn't explain it to you. Next question, Leo, how can truth be love? Isn't love just an emotion? This is a deep question. I don't really want to go into explaining it too much here because I'll have dedicated episodes in the future about how truth and love are connected. I'll just say for now that they're absolutely identical. Love is not an emotion. Love is not a human thing. Love is the very substrate of existence. Love is consciousness. Love is nothingness. Love is truth. I know that sounds outlandish. You don't believe that the universe can possibly love? Leo, how can the universe love? This is silly. It's so new agey. Well, you're deluded. So it can't be explained to you until you awaken. You need to have an awakening into the nature of what love is. And just because you had an awakening into the nature of truth does not mean you understand what love is. That's an additional little wrinkle right there. Next question. But Leo, if I go pursuing the truth like you say, and then I find the truth, isn't it possible that my truth will be different from your truth? Like maybe, different people can have their own truths? No, that's not possible. You can interpret it in different ways. You can conceptualize the absolute truth in different ways. You can speak about it in different ways. You can use different metaphors. You can access different aspects of it, but it itself is singular. And if you really go deep with this and you discover all the aspects, you'll see that it accords with what I'm telling you here. So you're not going to have this problem. Next question. But Leo, is what you're saying in this video, is this the truth or not? Because if what you're saying here is the truth, then you contradict yourself because you say the truth can't be spoken. And yet, Leo, if what you're saying here isn't the truth, then why am I even listening to you? Because everything you're saying here is false and it's not the truth, and you also contradict yourself. Because supposedly you're telling me what the truth is here, and yet you're also trying to tell me that this isn't the truth. So which is it? Are you saying the truth or not? Yeah, now you understand the paradox. This is the paradox. See, you're stuck in your mind. You're stuck with these dualistic categories. Like I told you, the truth cannot be communicated. And of course, I'm not above that limitation. All the words that I use are not the absolute truth, but also they are. You got to get it. If you're still stuck debating with me here, it's because you're stuck at the level of language. You're stuck at the second order. You need to move to the first order, where you read between the lines, where you don't look at the finger, you look at the thing that my finger is pointing at. You look at the moon. And the last question is, but Leo, isn't it egotistical to say that you know the absolute truth? I thought spirituality and enlightenment was all about being humble and modest. And you seem so arrogant and narcissistic. You're not modest at all. Shouldn't we be reasonable and admit that we just don't know? Leo, shouldn't you just, if you were honest, wouldn't you just admit that you don't know? Isn't that what the truth is? See, you're being very sneaky here and clever. No, the truth is just what it is. You can be humble or not. It doesn't fucking matter to the truth. I'm just being direct and blunt with you. I'm trying to frame these teachings in a way that appeals to ordinary people. I try to be a little bit dramatic. I try to exaggerate sometimes. I try to play it up sometimes. I try to be emotional sometimes. I try to be cute with you, whatever. I act out sometimes, to make this stuff interesting for me and for you. I don't want to be up here just, reading you a boring lecture about truth. I'm trying to make it kind of interesting. So sometimes I'm in your face. I'm provocative. I like to deliberately provoke you sometimes by making outrageous claims. But in the end, if you go through this whole journey, what you'll discover is that every outrageous claim that I've made is going to pale in comparison to what you will discover. So sometimes I exaggerate and I bloviate and I do this sort of stuff. I huff and puff because when I'm trying to communicate to you, I'm not trying to strictly just like be literal. Sometimes when I'm trying to be more poetic, and I'm also trying to communicate to you on an emotional level the significance of what this is. Because it's not like you just discover the truth, the absolute truth of the whole universe one day, and then you just say like, oh yeah, okay, cool, I got it. Let's just go about my ordinary life. Like it's not like that. It transforms you. And I'm trying to get across to you the significance of that transformation, because the whole point here is to inspire and to motivate you, rather than just to strictly give you some formal definition of what the truth is. It is not egotistical to say that one knows the absolute truth if one does. Now, if you have never experienced the absolute truth, if you never become conscious of it directly, then sure, you would be lying. And you might wonder, well, Leo, how do I know that you've actually experienced the absolute truth? I can't know that. Of course you can't. Nor am I asking you to know it, that I know it. I'm asking you to know it for yourself. Or rather, even I'm just inviting you. I'm proposing this as a possibility. I'm suggesting that it might be something worthwhile for you to pursue. That's all I'm doing here. It would actually be untruthful of me if I said that I don't understand what the absolute truth is. Because I do. Either you do or you don't. And of course, there's shades in between. You can have different degrees of understanding. I'm not saying I have the ultimate understanding. I'm not saying I can't go further. I certainly feel like I can, but at this point, I feel like I understand it enough that I can share with you what I'm sharing with you now and be fairly confident about it. Now, let me conclude this episode by giving you some warnings about truth, because truth is a very, very sneaky, tricky thing. There's nothing more sneaky than truth. Number one, warning. Beware of anyone who claims to know the truth and touts the truth and uses truth as part of their brand name or teaching. There are a lot of devils in the world who like to construct various kinds of ideologies They construct these ideologies, and of course, all these ideologies claim to be the truth, to know the truth, to be the most truthful, the most authentic. Be extremely suspicious of this. This is the devil's number one tactic, is to co-opt the truth. Of course, the irony here is that I talk about the truth a lot. So you're probably wondering, well, Leo, so does that mean I should be wary of you? Yes, you should be wary of me. From your perspective, I could be a deluded cult leader. As far as you know, I could be insane. You don't know. You have no idea. I could be a murderer. You don't know. So yeah, beware. Beware. Be skeptical. Validate everything I say. Don't take anything here as dogma. Beware. Warning number 2. If you think truth is a property of the mind or the brain, you don't understand what truth is. If you think that truth is some human phenomenon, you don't understand what truth is. Go deeper. Warning number 3. Truth is not merely formlessness or cessation. This is a problem I notice some meditators and Buddhist types falling into. There are certain states of consciousness that one can access where you can have a total cessation of all perception, for example. Total formlessness, they might call it. And this might seem like the absolute truth. And while that's correct, that is the absolute truth. But the mistake is to think that that is the absolute truth, while this here, this formed world, these colors and sights and sounds, I'm spitting over myself, that cessation is separate from what's going on here. No, what's going on here is precisely identical to cessation. Form and formlessness are identical, so don't fall into that trap. The entire relative domain is absolute truth in disguise. Cessation of experience is not necessary for realization of absolute truth, although it could be a good experience to have, but it's not mandatory, nor is it the end-all be-all. Truth is right here, right now, always, at all times, under all conditions, no matter what's happening, whether you feel happy or sad, whether you see colors or don't, whether there are aliens raping you or not, it doesn't matter. The truth is always there. The truth just is the case of whatever is happening. If aliens are raping you, that's the truth. If all experience has ceased and there's just pure empty void, then that's the truth. Warning number 4. One awakening does not guarantee that you will understand absolute truth. There are many aspects to awakening and many degrees and depths to it. So be careful. You might have had a single awakening, and maybe you have realized no self, for example. Maybe you have had some glimpses into the fact that you're not real, that you're imaginary, that you weren't ever born. Great, but that does not mean you understand what absolute truth is. You must go deeper. In fact, I suspect that most people who have their initial awakenings and glimpses of no self and so forth, they still don't know what absolute truth is. In fact, I know some Zen masters, some meditation teachers who teach for decades. They teach, and in my interviews with them, my conversations with them, I don't get the sense that they understand what truth actually is, even though I consider them enlightened or awakened. So, to really understand what truth is, you got to go very deep with this work. And a little bit of meditation here and there, it's not going to be enough. Warning number 5. You will not access the truth without a change in your state of consciousness. So don't be wasting your time sitting there and just kind of thinking your way into the truth. You're not going to think your way into the truth. You need a change in your state of consciousness. And the easiest way for you to do that is through psychedelics. There are other ways. There's yoga, there's intense concentration, there's meditation retreats and so forth, vipassana. All of those can help. All of those work, but nothing is as immediate and as guaranteed as a psychedelic. Which, of course, you have to be careful with. I don't recommend psychedelics for people under 21. You have to be mature. You have to be responsible. You have to do it carefully. So just don't get the wrong idea here. Warning number 6. Anything you think is the absolute truth is probably a lie. Stop fooling yourself. The absolute truth is not what you think it is. Also, I want to connect this a little bit with psychology, because you might be wondering, like, at this point, well, Leo, but this is getting so abstract and so metaphysical that it's like, what about just helping me in my ordinary life? What does truth have to do with that? Which is why I bring forth to you this quote by Abraham Maslow. Quote, "All the techniques of the therapist are in one way or another truth revealing, or are ways of strengthening the patient so he can bear the truth." End quote. So he's talking about therapy patients, and you're thinking to yourself, well, Leo, I don't go to therapy. I'm not a patient. What does this got to do with me? What this has to do with you is that all of us basically are therapy patients. It's just that some of us go to therapy and most of us don't. And it's the ones that don't who are really screwed up. All of this work we're doing, self-actualizing, it's therapy basically. We're doing therapy work. If you want to fix your life, if you're frustrated with your life, you need therapy. But not therapy with a therapist. You need to do your own inner therapy, self-therapy. So what does that involve? That involves strengthening yourself to be able to bear more and more of the truth, as Maslow says here. What is psychopathology? It's being dishonest with yourself. The gap between you and truth, if it becomes too great, all sorts of terrible dysfunctions arise in your life. Emotional problems, addictions, frustrations, hang-ups, bullying behavior, cheating, immorality, devilry, depression, anger, emotional problems, laziness, nihilism. All of these are just symptoms, surface symptoms of something much deeper, which is your disconnection from the truth. Why are you unhappy fundamentally in your life? Why are you suffering? Why are you lost? Why are you confused? Why are you running around like a chicken with its head cut off? Because you're disconnected from truth. And the more you resist and deny the truth, the more dysfunctional you become. And the worse it gets, and your life goes into this downward spiral, and you suffer more and more and more and more. So this is why the truth is important in practice. This is why the truth is not just some abstraction. You need it to be fulfilled, because only by being conscious of absolute truth are you conscious of your own true nature, because truth is what you are. Right now, you don't know what you are. And so you are engaged in all sorts of dysfunctional, petty activities to distract from discovering what you are, which is your mission in this life, is to discover what you are and what the universe is. But you're so distracted by your survival needs that you've really lost your way. And no amount of success within your survival needs will resolve this problem. Don't be fooling yourself into thinking that if I just get an extra $100,000 or $1 million, or if I just get a few more cars or a better house, or if I get my dream girlfriend, or if I get my dream husband, that will do it for me. It's not going to do it for you. Nothing will do it for you until you discover yourself as absolute truth. That's what'll do it for you. And then from there, you can live a good life. The wisest human beings pursue truth for truth's sake, not out of suffering. Everything else that you're doing is nonsense. Become a truth seeker. I promise you that it'll be worth it. It will be worth it. I can't communicate to you how much it will be worth it. But precisely because the reward is so great, the cost is also so great. So you're going to have to be willing to stomach the cost of seeking the truth. And the cost will be yourself. The cost will be your egotism. But then again, that's real change. That's transformation. You want a change in your life? You want a significant improvement? Well, you got to do something radically different than you've been doing. Because if you just keep doing what you've basically been doing, but you just change the surface of it, you're not going to get significant change. What I'm talking about here is significant change, a very different way to live your life. All right, that's basically it. I just want to leave you with one final warning that everything that I teach is not religion. It's not even science. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm not asking you to hold me as an authority figure, as someone who knows more than you. I'm just a guy who's pointing out stuff you can discover for yourself, and your job is to do serious inquiry for yourself and to rediscover everything that I told you. It does you no good just to listen to me. You got to do the work. You actually have to awaken. And remember that everything I said in this episode is not the truth, but it also is the truth. And this is my finger pointing to the moon. All right, that's it. I'm done here. Please click the like button for me and come check out my website. That's Actualized.org right there. You'll find my blog where I post a lot of interesting and exclusive content, including vlogs that I shoot, various interesting YouTube videos that I share, links that I share, resources, documentaries. It's cool stuff. Check that out. Check it periodically. I update it multiple times a week. Check out my book list. Check out my life purpose course. And come check out the forum. And on the forum, you can get any of your questions answered. We have some enlightened folks there who can guide you. We have resources. We just recently opened up a new sub-forum on conscious politics and government and environment and society. So we're having discussions there about that. All good stuff. And the last thing that I just want to reiterate to you here is that Actualized.org is not pretending to be the truth. It might seem that way, but that's not what it is. It's never been that. Actualized.org is just a set of relative, partial, contingent, mental scaffoldings which help to guide you towards a deeper understanding of yourself and life. That's all it is. It's like training wheels. Do not take these teachings too seriously, too literally. Their function is pragmatic. It's not ideological. I don't have an ideological function with my content. I'm not trying to build some master philosophy and then program it into your mind of all my viewers and then to build an organization, a religion around it or whatever. I'm not trying to do that. It's just mental scaffolding. You use scaffolding to build the building and then you throw the scaffolding away. That's exactly how my videos work. You don't worship my videos. You don't take them as gospel. You don't even take them as truth. You just recognize that these are helpful to you if they are. If they're not, stop watching them. If they are, keep watching them. If they help to motivate you, to inspire you, that's the point. If they help to engage you and to get you activated into action, into practices, that's the point. If they get you to read new books and to study new videos and content and they expose you to new sources of information, that's the point. And then as you're going through the journey, you're doing the practices, you're discovering this stuff for yourself, you don't need to go back and rewatch the videos unless you need a reminder, unless you forget something. But generally, you don't need to go back and rewatch and study this stuff the way that Christians study a Bible. You don't need to do that. It's just scaffolding. If I had a Bible, if I took all of my teachings and I wrote it into a Bible, the Bible would be that you read the whole Bible, and the last page of the Bible would say, burn this book. So you would read the whole book, you would master everything in the book, and then once it is no longer useful to you, you take that book, you throw it in the fire, and then you walk off into the sunset and you enjoy your life. That's what this work is. So don't cling to it too much.